Is there a coup brewing in Silicon Valley?
Hello and welcome to today's Daily Blitz. The Silicon Valley-based FANG stocks have been dominating stock market returns, but they've also been dominating the actual earnings of corporates in America as well. So it's not quite clear that they are in a bubble. Despite that, the debate is all about what is going to eventually pop this bubble in at least the price of all of these stocks. And Boaz here has come up with a surprising catalyst that I haven't heard discussed anywhere else.
Yeah, so over the past decade, you've seen tech stocks in general, not just the FANGs, but also in the startup community within unicorns of the likes of Uber and Lyft, all have been dominating the stock market and dominating financial media as well. They've managed to hoover up all this capital that you would normally expect to be pushed into other sectors of the economy. Now, various people have come up with various other theories as to what might finally break these massive titans of the stock market. And this generally goes on lines of things like government antitrust action, where they're going to break these up like they did with Standard Oil, or things like a stock market collapse, where if this bubble gets popped and you see a big collapse in the valuations, well, that's what's finally going to put Silicon Valley down, really finally bring it to heel. However, there is a possibility, a brewing possibility, that what will actually take these big companies down, including the startups as well, is something that we haven't seen for several decades now. It's something you don't really see much of outside of things like transport or universities, for that matter. And that's unions.
And there's been some recent news that has brought this idea out for you, right?
Yes, that's right. So I was only put onto this idea from this bit of news that came out last week, which is regarding the fact that there is the first ever Silicon Valley independent employee union, which is called Kickstarter United. And this is a union against Kickstarter, the large startup base. And this has been driven by 18 months of wages and labor hours negotiation, but it's been going on between Kickstarter and its employees. So this is the first ever independent union in Silicon Valley. And I think this might be a significant milestone now for other unions within the sector to really rise up, because there is, interestingly, an awful lot of unrest these days within the Silicon Valley base.
So you see this idea of a union within Silicon Valley is spreading out not just to FANG stocks, but to the entire industry as well.
Well, yes, I think this might actually set a precedent for other unions to be created and for them to further haggle over wages, hours, employment rights, things like that within Silicon Valley. Because so far, Silicon Valley's really had this image of being very friendly to employees, all about hoodies in work. And lots of flexible hours, things like that, working from home. Incredible employee benefits of the likes of great cafeterias, all that kind of thing. But in the recent years, that has really started to go into reverse.
So how's all this going to spin back to investors and how those shareholders are impacted?
Right, so while Kickstarter is a very big company, there have been an awful lot of stirrings within the likes of Microsoft and Google as well. So with Microsoft, for example, there's a lot of workers who have been very irritated that they were bidding for the Pentagon's cloud infrastructure contract, which was called the JEDI contract, which was a Joint Enterprise Defense Initiative, I believe. And they won that from Amazon, but it's still held by Microsoft. And a lot of Microsoft employees were very unhappy about this. They're also unhappy with Microsoft doing a lot of work for the immigration agency in the US. But it's not just Microsoft either. Recently as well, you had Google actually firing a lot of their employees who had walked out over unfair labor practices. And then last week over at Oracle, you had Larry Ellison, the Samurai CEO's company. He was going to stage a fundraiser for Donald Trump. And you had an awful lot of employees saying that they were going to do a walkout or a log off, as so many of them work remotely, to protest this event. There's so much unrest within Silicon Valley. And the ways in which this might actually flare up, well, there's several ways about it. You could have strikes, you could have a lot of haggling over wages, pretty much all of the things that you don't want if you're a shareholder in the company. A slowing down profitability, a reduction in profitability. This is not going to be very good for the shares of these companies if it happens in a big way.
So where do we go from here? Are these companies going to have competitors who are willing to work with the military and the immigration department, who will be making that money instead of the FANGs? Or will the FANGs eventually sort of win out over their own employees and sort of push the company line through?
Well, it's very interesting to see how it will turn out, because another one of the stories that has been attributed to Silicon Valley giants these days is the fact that they're so anti-competition. They've managed to buy out any potential competitor before it, reaches its infancy even, and then just subsumed them into their own core. So it'll be interesting to see if there is any competitor that is allowed to compete while all of this stirring is going on within the giants, whether or not they'll still shell out billions to buy out any competition when they're already fighting people from within their own organization. But I think it's a significant risk that plenty of investors are not really thinking about. Indeed, I wasn't thinking about it, and I don't think I've met anyone who is either. But it's an aspect of the 1970s which may come back to haunt Silicon Valley today.
So to sum up today's Daily Blitz, the risk to the FANG stocks and the possible tech bubble today might actually come from inside those companies in the form of unions.
So be sure to keep an eye out for more stories on Silicon Valley unionism, because I think you're going to see an awful lot more about it in the near future. But that sums up today's Daily Blitz. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell down below, and we'll see you in the next one.